Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We are from the HCH 510 team at Asian Health Services. And so we're really glad to be here with everyone today to talk a little bit about our experience, and also our journey in terms of our identity and coming out. I think all of us have different experiences and identify differently. And so hopefully this will be a very fruitful workshop for everyone. And so today's workshop is called Discovering and Embracing Our True Selves, a journey through identity and coming out. Um, and so I think we could start out by just introducing each other, ourselves. And so I will start first. So my name is Chris Dang. I am 29 years old. I'm from a hodgepodge of different places, born in Minnesota, raised in the Midwest, for the most part in Ohio. And I went to college and in my adult life on the East Coast, so Philadelphia and New York, lived a couple years in Florida for work, and now I'm here in the Bay. And I think telling you that is a little important in terms of understanding my identity later on, as we go into it. And I identify as he, him, and I consider myself as gay. And so I will pass it on to Kenneth.
Hey, I'm Kenneth. Chris said earlier that we're part of the 510 HH team. I'm also part of the youth program team as well. So it's kind of like a mini collab today. Um, my age, I am 24 years old. Where I'm from, I'm actually from out here. I'm from the Bay Area. Currently residing in Richmond. And how I identify, I go by he, him. It's in my username. And I also identify as gay. And I'll go ahead and pass it on to Han.
It's me. Okay, yeah. Hello, nice to meet everyone. My name is Han, pronounced he and they. I guess in terms of facility stuff, I think I'm trying out this triple A thing where I identify as asexual, aromantic, and agender. And so there's that. And then I was born in Korea actually, and I immigrated here when I was about 9, over to Texas, which is where my parents are still are at. And then wait, so what's that? I'm also 29, I think. Yes. I think we're the same age. And so I think I grew up in Texas and then went to college in the East Coast, and now I'm like all the way in the West Coast. And so I've hopped around a little bit too, I guess. But yeah, so that's a little thing about me. And I'm also on the same team, ACH team as Chris, where we do HIV case management, PrEP navigation, general like sexual and reproductive health. And also I work too as a gender affirming care coordinator for our trans and non-binary patients.
Yes, thank you both. I think that was really good, Han, in terms of describing what we do as a team, and hopefully we could be a resource at any point for anyone who's listening into this. And so today's session is going to be a little bit more of a roundtable, where we're just going to be talking about our experiences. We have questions that we're going to pose, and we're going to share as much as we can to give insight to our stories, and hopefully that might feel relative to your experiences, or maybe you know someone, or you're just learning about, about an identity that you are not familiar with. And so with that being said, we have a QR code here for you to, at any point, ask us anything that might come up. We just did an introduction, so if you already have questions, about our identity, what we just said, please feel free to just drop those questions in. Um, it's completely anonymous, so you will be able to ask anything that truly you're interested in better understanding. So I encourage everyone to not be shy and to ask whatever you feel. And so I thought we could open up with
I was also Chris, I also wanted to add like we're doing a bit of a roundtable, and so you have the mentee, you have the chat, but anybody can also feel free to jump in, right? And so anyone on the call, whatever. So just wanted to add that too.
Yes, absolutely. And then you'll see the QR codes in all of the slides. But really good point. And so we thought to begin this journey about this conversation around coming out. The first point of like memory of when you realized what was the initial moment or experience that made you start questioning or thinking about your sexual or gender identity. And so want to first see if my colleagues wanted to start answering first.
I can answer first. So I guess okay, if I want to start from the beginning, I would say in middle school, I'm not gonna lie, I did have a girlfriend in middle school. Shocking.
Okay.
I did have a girlfriend in middle school. Um, but no, it's middle school. I don't really count it, but it was an experience. And as I went into high school, like obviously we broke up, whatever. Um, and then I wasn't really pursuing a relationship or anything throughout high school, but I was thinking about like, who I'm attracted to. And I started noticing I'm like, because I would always try to look at the girls, and I'm like, I don't know, I don't really feel anything special. Like, there's no
Mhm.
tingly feeling. And then I was like, some of these guys are good looking. And then that's when I was like, wait, I started to feel a little tingly feeling in my like stomach or like my
Clues are
heart.
adding up.
It's like things are adding up. And then in typical teenage fashion, I'm gonna be really honest. I was looking at like graphic images online,
Mhm.
again, typical teenage fashion. And I was like, huh, I kind of, I was like, oh, kind of like this.
Mhm.
And I believe that's the moment when I start actually experiencing like, oh, maybe I do like guys. And then from then on, that's kind of when I was like, yep, I see myself in the future marrying a man than a woman.
Mhm.
That's my realization.
Yeah. So Kenneth, if you could like throw in there also like when you did realize it, and I think we'll all answer the same thing. Like how did it make you feel?
It did. I was scared initially. I'm not gonna lie. It's always been a thing around. I feel like around my family and culture, um, that gay is bad, quote unquote, gay is bad. Because again, I've never met another person who was gay that's, from my family or in my culture at all. Let alone there was any talks about it. And especially because the language used around when I was younger as well. Like, I remember my parents saying something about, "Oh, if you're gay, I'm gonna kick you out the house." Like when I was a kid, but I think they were joking. I don't know if they were really joking, but that really stuck with me till now because I'm just like, "Oh, that's scary." And with that realization, I was like initially scared because I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna get kicked out." So I was in the closet for quite a while. I was hiding who I was, my identity for quite a while.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to your experience with just from the beginning. I've had girlfriends too. Um, and I don't know. I do remember that at some point as a very young child that I thought I had genuine crushes on girls, and perhaps I did, it's very possible. Um, but my realization story came when I was in um fourth or fifth grade, and I had a best friend, and his name was, well, a name I won't mention just in case, even though, they're probably not in California at all or anything,
Let's
but
have name, date of birth, and social, please.
yeah. And so I was in fifth grade, best friends, played all the time on the playground. He was um, just my best friend. And I decided that, in the moment, I wasn't thinking much of it, but I started to find an attraction towards him beyond being friends and in what felt like a crush. And so I really didn't really put one and one together. I didn't realize how different that might be. And so I wrote a letter to him confessing my love to him and my feelings. And at the last day of school that year, in fifth grade or so, I like slipped in his backpack and he didn't notice it. And so that night, when I got home, I called him and I told him that I if you could check his backpack because I left I left a note. And he's like, "Oh, let me check for it." And like the moment he's like, "Oh, I think I found it," I immediately hung up. And, yeah. And so I think that that was the summer that I realized, wait, uh, it was right after that moment. I'm like, wait, I have a crush on a guy. Uh, this feels different, and this from the environment that I was raised in, growing up at the time in Ohio, a suburban town, Asian community with terms of my family. Um, I was like, this doesn't seem quote unquote normal. And so that was my moment of realization. And I was like, I have to keep this a secret, and I grew up in a very predominant, white or heterosexual kind of environment. So I kept it a secret for a while. That was my realization that I liked people of the same sex. Han?
Golly, that is so exciting. I don't know if I can beat that, but smooth operator slipping that little note into his backpack. But yeah, I think I was kind of in a different place where so I mean obviously in terms of my background, right? Like my dad's a pastor actually. And so I mean, so there's that. They're also Korean, and so like there's also that kind of cultural and uh, unfamiliarity with like the queer community and so forth, right? So that wasn't really something that I grew up with either. I think for me, it was kind of I did have the fortune to one have access to the internet, which I think was very I think formative for a lot of us. And I think I was on Tumblr. I was a Tumblr gay, and so I think that I got to so that was really really helpful in just terms of like literally just like vocab or just like oh like here's people out there who are living different things who are feeling these things and like maybe I so on and so forth. And so that was really helpful. And actually the other really really helpful thing was that in my high school actually had like a QSA, right? Like a queer straight student alliance. And so one of my friends was gay. And so I think that created a much like more welcoming environment. And so I mean I think maybe like one of the very first like hints or something was I mean it was still when I was like in middle school. And I think I remember it very clearly actually like there was a moment I think me and a bunch of our friends was playing over at our house, and we were watching this video of oh gosh, what were they called? Panic at the Disco. I don't know if you guys recall that.
Yes, love them. I love them.
And it was specifically the music video for their song. What is it? I write sin, not tragedy.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so yeah, I know. And so I remember all my like female friends was like dying over that video, and it was like, oh my god, the singer is so hot. And I was like, and I really felt like, oh, I'm playing along with this, right? I'm like, I'm doing this. I could feel myself performing to kind of fit in and that with that crowd. And so I was like, oh, But I think for me, I didn't really start exploring or really thinking too deeply about it until high school. And so, and then I think for me, again, I think because I like kind of encountered like the terminology and like other people before I started questioning it myself. I think for me, it was very much more of like, I just thought about it for a long time. It wasn't really a quick moment where I was like, because I think also the other thing was it wasn't just about like, oh well, like how do I feel or like what do I want. It was also it kind of had the feeling where, oh well, if I start identifying as this, right, that's something that I'm taking on, right? Like okay, like I'm part of this community, like it's kind of entering a community, right? And so I think for me, like in terms of like identifying as trans or like non-binary, I think I took like the whole 4 year. I think when I started exploring like my gender identity in like college. I remember I went to like there used to be the student group called like Beyond the Binary, and it was for both like trans, non-binary, and questioning. And so like I went to that meeting pretty regularly, but I didn't fully start like okay like make the decision to start identifying until like after I graduated it actually. So I usually tend to just like take a real I take my own sweet time um uh figuring those out, and so that was kind of it for me.
Yeah, I think in this experience of sharing, we can see that all of our journeys have been different, and at different points we realize, something new about ourselves, and some of us may were able to decide in that first time, how do we identify, and then others may have to take it a little more time to really decide how they identify. And I would hope, and everyone, you guys can like chime in and just tell me what you guys think. Like, it just sounds like, you know, um, every journey is different, and there's no need to go ahead and make a decision just because on an identity group, just because you've had this one experience or this, one crush or this like, this moment of realization. Yeah.
Well, I like to also add, there's no time limit. There is no like, oh, I gotta, realize who I am by this time. No, you can realize, your identities or slash sexual identities at whatever point in your lifetime.
And then I'm curious to know if anyone wants to attempt to try to explain, just for viewers who may not know, the difference between sexual identity or sexual orientation and gender identity. And curious to know if anyone wants to try explaining that, to just so that we all are who are viewing this, they might have that as a question. I'm just curious. What do you guys think?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I'll just take a stab. Feel free to jump in. And so, I mean, I think there are like several different ways. Like, I think there may be a way that, for example, like if you're thinking legally and like people are thinking of like the non-discrimination clauses that you see, like, how they define sex and sexual orientation, blah, 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 right? And then there might be a different way you think about it when you're with friends. There might be a different way you think about it when you're with other straight people, when you're with other queer people and so forth, right? Yeah. And so, but I think kind of like, the very kind of like say like 101 kind of thing, right? Sexual orientation kind of has to, it's like an orientation, right? A direction.
Yeah.
So like, who do you like? Who are you attracted to? Like that sort of thing. And I think you can also think of gender kind of uh, more facing inward, right? Like, how do you feel your gender to be? And like, if you want to get into like queer theory and stuff like that, like you can kind of mix those up. But I think that's a kind of like a nice primer way to think about it if you're really new to those terms. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's a good to your point, how I guess I should have phrased the question like, how do you define sexual orientation, gender identity? Because each person might define it just a little bit different. And I think I'm along the same pages. I think for me, like sexual orientation is the outward. It's more like, who are you attracted to? And what kind of relationship, do you see yourself in? And gender identity is more inward, definitely. Like, how do you see yourself in terms of your gender? Because those two things they don't have to align necessarily, right? It's kind of what I'm pointing. So for example, you know, my gender identity is a male, and I identify as my sexual orientation is gay. But I kind of want to shed light on also the possibilities of like, oh, just because, for example, someone's transgendered, we assume that their sexual orientation is more on the heterosexual side, but that's not true as well. Yeah. Okay, so moving on. So this is the point of realization. And so when we think about after we've realized it, uh, what do we do? Is the real question. And what are those influences and barriers, that influence that journey of like, okay, when do I come out? Like, how do I do it? What are the barriers that may stop us in the process? So what roles did your culture, social, or familial background play in your journey of self-discovery and identity exploration? And so maybe I can just start us off. I think, all of us here are Asian, right? So we can definitely kind of share a common conversation around our experience being Asian and how that has influenced our culture, I mean, our experience. And so um, I think mine is a little interesting. Most Vietnamese families would probably be very conservative on this particular topic in terms of sexual orientation and identity. Um, and I had that sense off the bat. Um, and so because of that, it really did deter me from speaking up. I grew up around also very uh machismo uncles. My father was not in the picture as well. There was an expectation to, be tough and to do, you know, yard work and to, play a certain way, have an interest in these kind of stereotypical male things like sports or I don't know, guns or just have an interest in things like, that obviously don't today hold up, in terms of identifying as like machismo. But I think that played a big role in me wanting to keep everything a secret from my family. And so what I needed to do was figure out who I could tell. And so I did also grow up in a very like typical Midwest American school culture where the guys played sports, the girls were either cheerleaders or also playing sports. Sports was really big. So I got into sports because I think partly because it felt like a way to fit into the culture and blend in. And I as I got closer to individuals while playing sports, I identified closely with more of like my female team members in track, for example. And I was like, okay, I think that I'm getting close enough with them where I think they can kind of guess my, sexuality. And I don't think I think I presented not fully heterosexual and that and just through my dress and the way that I spoke. And I think I potentially did that purposefully with certain people. And so I told a friend, and that friend was had the expectation of me sharing that with another friend to confirm it was real. In retrospect, I think, was that probably a good idea for my friend to have asked that to someone? Maybe not. But in that moment, I did decide to tell another friend like a day later. Um, and they were really cool with it. They kept it a secret as well. And later on went to telling my cousins, my sister. That would seem the easiest. I was close with them. And my family, eventually, the adults, I came out as well, senior year of high school, to the first adult in my family, which was an uncle. And in fact, I think this kind of breaks the social like construct of Asian culture a little bit. My uncle was the initiator. He was like, I know you're hiding something, and I just want you to know that no matter what it is, I love you no matter what.
Oh.
And that really kind of, at least from my experience, realized that though we were Vietnamese, and typically this might have been a very big, you know, uh, negative kind of experience, there was some sort of Western influence in my family, a little bit enough for them to kind of maybe say that. And my family is a little bit a blend between the two cultures. And so yeah, that was when I decided, okay, if my uncle does it, loves me, I think everyone will. In terms of my aunt, uncles, and my parents. So I just fully came out. And I never really actually came out officially to my mom and my dad. It kind of just just happened and they just understood. So that is my cultural story and growing up in like a very like predominantly white, Midwestern, and Asian culture. Yeah, it kept me from coming out fully 100% until senior year. So how about anyone who wants to go? Maybe Kenneth or on?
Yeah, I can go next. So I think okay, starting high school, I would say yeah, the my high school is very predominantly black and brown folks. And like with that, there's very like machismo energy around. So I wasn't like really out in high school. Like people assumed, or some people would assume, and I wouldn't care. It's not like I officially came out. I was like, oh, hey, I'm gay. Like they would just like if they think that I am, I'm just like, okay, like I mean, you're not wrong. I did tell, like officially tell, like my friends, of course, my close circle of friends. So half of them were like, oh, well, kind of new. The other half was like, what? So I don't know. I feel like I did a pretty good job of hiding in the closet. Um, I would say I'm very there's your story with you like coming up to your sister or and slash cousins, very similar because I thought I was the gay cousin. No, I had other gay cousins. I had a lot of other gay cousins.
That's so funny. Yeah. A lot of other.
A whole cohort.
No, I'm telling you, there's like one from every family. I was like, dang.
Oh wow.
I was like, damn, what were you hiding this whole time? But yes, I came out to those ones specifically. Um, and then I also came out to my aunt as well, the cool auntie that will always fight for you or always buy you things when you were little. The aunt I came out to, and that was all in high school. I haven't came out to my immediate family yet until like I would say officially 3 years ago. Unofficially, four, because there was a moment at a family party where I was under the influence and they were gay bashing for some reason, and I was like fighting for gay rights when I was drunk. And I felt like that's when they kind of suspected something. But
Whoopsie
officially,
daisy.
yeah, officially the moment that I officially came out, it was actually because I was in a relationship with my then boyfriend. And he felt like I was hiding him, and I was like, no, like, I swear I'm not. It's just super hard with the situation right now. And then we kind of like had a talk, and I was like, okay, I'll come out to my family for you.
That's so
And
sweet.
yes, I just want to say you should don't have
Active
to come
love.
out to your
Yeah.
family for any person. That was just because I was like young and I wasn't thinking any better. I was thinking ahead. But yes, disclaimer,
And love.
yeah. Disclaimer, yeah, for love. I was deeply in love. But disclaimer, you don't have to come out for anybody. You come out on your own time. But this is my experience. Came out for a boy. And my mom was cool with it. My dad was also cool with it. I had later learned that you know, it was my dad that was cool with it first, with me being gay.
Mhm.
Yeah, surprisingly, he was the
Yeah.
one that convinced my mom that
Wow.
me being okay was gay. Okay, me being gay was okay.
You
Um,
being okay is gay.
yes. I was hoping like
Another
It's always, yeah.
another example of define what we assumed as like culturally, Asian.
Mhm.
yeah, I felt like it was because my dad, in his eyes, he was like, if it's whatever makes me happy, then he doesn't care. And that's exactly the
Wow.
swearing words that he used for my mom because my mom was the one that was I guess, quote unquote, sad about my coming out. Um,
Hmm.
because, she was also expressing, like, oh, I haven't been sleeping because of you. I always, I've been feeling sad because of what you said. Trying to, like, do that whole guilt trip thing
Mm.
that,
Yeah.
Asian moms typically use. But my dad was the one that kind of like, let him be him. Like if he's happy, then what does it matter to us? So that kind of actually made me got a lot closer to my father as well because I just be a lot closer to my mom. Um,
Wow.
but yeah, never knew my dad had my back like that.
Wow. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Does the Hmong culture like is it also pretty conservative?
Oh, I'm not Hmong. I'm Mien.
Oh, sorry, man. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah,
Whoops.
my Mien culture is pretty conservative. I would say so how we would divide it is there are the OG Mien, so the older folks, they're pretty conservative. The folks who like came straight from like Thailand slash Laos slash Vietnam, come here, they're pretty conservative. The ones that grew up here though, or second generation, they are more open. They're a lot
Yeah.
more open.
Mhm.
I would say my dad is a little bit of both because he came here when he was younger. He came here at like 11 years old.
Yeah.
So he kind of grew up in here.
Mhm.
So I feel like that also has a lot to do with why he was a lot more accepting than my mom is.
Yeah.
I also think there might be I mean, I'm not about to go too deep because I don't know, but I also wonder if there isn't, we say like Asian culture, right? But I wonder if there's also maybe there's a Asian American culture versus Asian like homeland culture. And I don't just mean like, oh, like, kind of like absolutely there's a lot of like what like you said, Kenneth, like, maybe with like younger generations there's more like familiarity and maybe more acceptance. But I also wonder if there isn't also um sometimes like a kind of like an opposite reaction where I feel like sometimes like immigrant communities can get a little more conservative because of the challenges they face as an immigrant in the US, right? Like, you get a bit more of like, okay, like you have to stick together as a community, and that kind of sometimes means like conforming, right? And that means like you don't stick out, you don't, you're already kind of disadvantaged here in the US, like you're already gonna have it tough as an immigrant, so like why would you like start identifying as gay and things like that, right? And so I wonder, like I think like I wonder, I don't know if you guys have any experience, but like I expect like that can also be something that comes into play. I think for me, I think actually the fact that like I used to identify as a woman, and kind of like the fact that I was AFAB kind of had a big influence on how I started identifying, by which I meant like I think it took me so long to identify as say like asexual, right? Because I was like, oh, like am I asexual, or like am I just like, like did I like internalize the idea that women can't be like sexually empowered or like blah 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 blah, you know what I mean? And so, and then also with like gender, right? Is like, oh, what the am I like actually trans or non-binary, or am I just kind of am I very like I'm just against like these kinds of like very set gender roles or things like that. And so as you can kind of see, I just like thought about stuff a lot, and I feel like my life would have been a lot easier if I just thought about things less. And so I think that was a bit right, because there was, I think, again, like because I started exploring more of these things like maybe high school and college, and I think a lot of kids get more like politicized, right? Like you start caring things kind of learning about things and caring about things like that a lot in like high school and college. And so like that kind of like political background was like a bigger factor than I expected it. And then I think, yeah, in terms of like family and like cultural and stuff like that, I think in terms of, I don't know about you guys' family, but like language, right? I think that was just like the first thing. I think it was
Yeah.
actually kind of funny because I think I majored as a gender and sexuality studies major in college, and so you can kind of see a pattern here. But like I didn't even know how to come out to my parents that I was a gender and sexuality studies major, because I just didn't know what to call it in Korean. I was like, women's studies. I study women. Is that right? Like I don't know if that was what I was supposed to say in Korean. I think, and so I think that that was a factor. I would also say the fact that my parents were, like I said, my dad's a pastor, and actually it was kind of crazy where I had like a whole coming out because I'm not religious. And I think my parents cared a lot more about that than me being gay. And so like there was a lot of fighting about like, I kind of like you, Kenneth, like I also had the thing where my mom was like, I don't know where I went wrong in raising you, but it was about me not being, not being Christian. And so I'm like, well, I guess I get the experience regardless. So thanks. But so I think that was, but I think also just like in terms of just like the bigger environment, like I think it was helpful that I was in the US, right? Because I think, for example, like again, my dad's a pastor and like they're Methodist, right? And like the Methodist church actually had like a couple of years ago, they had this like huge vote or like or a schism or whatever about like, hey, how do we feel about gay people? Yay or nay? And so I think that kind of helped me kind of what's scope my parents out, like, oh, like this thing happened, huh? Not of any personal interest to me, but like, how are you guys feeling about this political issue? And so I think that was kind of helpful in kind of getting ready to tell my parents. But kind of also similarly, like, all right, I told my friends first, 100%, and then I think I told my parents. My parents were definitely the last. I think I only came out to them like last year actually, and so yeah, I think in some ways, like the closer people are, like it's again, it's also like PSA, right? Like who you tell and why, right? That has nothing to do with how close you are to them or whether you trust them or what their values are, what your values are, right? But at the same time, I think in terms of my parents, right? Sometimes because they're closer, you just get more cautious. And so I think that was also part of it, not just like, oh, I don't think my parents will get it because they're like of a different generation or whatever. But I think there's also a part of that as well.
Yeah. Wow, and I can imagine also being in Texas, right? Oh
I
yeah, that
like
was
to
a
add
fun
on what
part of
you
it.
said earlier, Han, about like the whole like your theory on like immigration, like conformity.
Uh-huh.
It does line up because my family came from Thailand, like the land famous for like the trans women
Right.
there. So I feel like yeah, your theory of like immigration and conformity definitely like plays out.
Yeah, I know for sure. And so, I mean, it's not always that's not always the case, but I think sometimes, right? Like the context matters, where you are, when you are, and things like that. Yeah, for sure.
Love it. I think we're actually almost at 10:45, and so
Hmm.
let's see how fast we can get through this.
Yes.
How do you find support? Maybe we all can just do like rapid
Yeah.
response. Um, my girlie's in school in high school. That
And
was how
track,
I
right? You said.
track, yeah. And like I related to people who did well in like math class, so we would struggle together in like honors math. And I just found my people, my closest friends, really, and that's who I started with.
Yeah, I think for me, I think as I mentioned, right, like the internet, that's a huge resource. I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff out there, but like, just keep your cool and like, if you know what you're doing, right? Like that's like you don't always have to interact, just like knowing that there's like resources out there, there's organizations, there's other people, individuals, things like that. Like that could be really helpful for yourself as well. And I think again, like this like I think it's totally like as we've been saying, right? There's you come out on your own terms, right? And so like there's literally like there's no timeline, there's no like you don't have to come out to anyone or like there's like you that's up to you. And so I think for me, like being strategic in how I came out when, who, right? And kind of testing the ground first and just kind of like both are they cool? And if I do want to come out, right, like then how do I want to do it? And kind of preparing for both like best, worst, and probably somewhere in the middle is what'll actually happen kind of scenario. And so yeah, I think that was and just especially I think when you're like I mean this also it depends very much on where you are, but like like school orgs, right? Like during college especially, I think like everybody starts to be gay during college, and so you're gonna find a lot of a lot of like community there, especially for if you're just starting to explore. There's also going to be other people who are also questioning, confused, blah blah blah. And so if you don't if you can take that step to like show up to one of the meetings, that can be really helpful.
Yeah, I agree with Han. Definitely in school, there's a lot of resources. I feel like in college, a lot of people are like, I don't care what you are, like, fun, let's go, like, live your life. Um, but there are definitely those support groups in college. I would say in my high school there was one as well. Like they would like pass notes to like classes and like take the students who do identify as queer. I wasn't fully out when that happened to me, so I was just like, who told? I was like, who told? Who outed me? I like walked into a room full of like other queer kids and I was like, but yes.
I'm just a bystander, actually. I'm just
Right. I just
come
caught a
on.
stray bullet. Like, ooh. I will also say I had a little experience same with Chris as well because I was also in my high school volleyball team and volleyball has that connotation that gay men like to play it.
Yeah.
It's not always true, but
Mhm.
in this sense, like two or three other players in there were
Mhm.
also gay, so I also have them as friends as well.
Yeah. I wanted to add how big also the internet was for me as well, actually, in January, because there was no film, there was no books, there was no one I could talk to growing up in the Midwest. And I think that where the internet is at today, and just all the public figures and influencers that you see today who are just openly gay, openly, who they are in terms of identity and sexual orientation, I think it's probably even more helpful than it was back then. But what I would love to leave a message with, I think we all would agree, is like, don't be timid to explore, and if the internet is your way of doing that, there's no shame in that. It's a great resource to figure out who you are, what you like, what you don't like. If you don't have a community outside of you to go to. So that I think concludes our session. It went by really fast, actually, much faster than I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So your time passes
I
when you're
can go
having
ahead and check
fun.
the
Yeah.
mentee for any anonymous questions.
Yes. Maybe we can see if there's any anonymous questions. I have it open now, and apparently there's no questions, but is there anything else any of us want to just leave a message?
Oh, like party thoughts?
Yeah.
Be gay, kids. No, I can't.
Absolutely. Be who you are on your
Yeah.
own terms at your own pace.
And in terms of TikTok talk, be who you are in your pride.
So
That's
you can
for
tell Kenneth is from YP because I have no idea what that is.
that's for
I
the
don't
people who
know.
are chronically online slash on TikTok. So.
There you go. Well, if there isn't any more comments or no questions coming through, we wanted to leave everyone with the information. This is the HCH 10 office, like we mentioned. That is where we work. And so there is a phone number there. We take all calls if you have a question.
You can also text, I think. Yeah.
About identity, about who you are, or your need of resources. Please feel free to reach out to us. And then we do have an Instagram as well.
Yeah.
So
I also want to bring up, I think QQ texted in the chat that thank you for having this workshop and thank you for being here. So, yeah.